The engines on Sir Topham Hatt's railway loved shunting freight cars and coaches into place. But sometimes there was too much work to be done. One day Sir Topham Hatt came to see the engines. "Thomas and Henry, you will meet up with Toby and Neil at the shunting yard," said Sir Topham Hatt. "So you shall pull coaches." "Thank you, sir," said Henry. "Coaches are fun," said Thomas. "Who do you think is waiting?" Sir Topham Hatt said that Toby is waiting at the shunting yard. "He is, Percy. I can't think of that," said Thomas. "You wait and see, Thomas," said James. "Maybe Neil would shunt more freight cars than any other engine." So Thomas and Henry set off to the shunting yard. Later, Thomas and Henry arrived at the shunting yard. Toby was glad to see them. "We must be waiting for our coaches," Toby said happily. A little later, Neil brought some coaches for Henry. "Some coaches, Henry?" said Neil. "Oh, yes, please," said Henry. A bit later, Neil shunted Henrietta for Toby. "Here you go, Toby," said Neil. "Thank you, Neil," Toby said happily. "May I have some coaches, please?" asked Thomas. "You may," said Neil, "as soon as you pull your freight cars." "But Neil, I don't like freight cars," said Thomas. "Freight cars are so wonderful," said Neil. "You'll be strong enough to pull them." "I won't do it," said Thomas crossly. "Then sorry," Neil said sadly. "No coaches, no freight cars." "Freight cars are fun, Thomas," said Toby. "In fact, you would be strong enough to pull them." "I want some coaches too." "All right, Thomas," said Neil. "I'll get you some freight cars." "I still won't pull my freight cars," said Thomas huffily. Neil stopped. "Then sorry. Then no freight cars. I meant no coaches for you," said Neil. "You need to be pulling freight cars every day, Thomas," said Toby, "so you can make special deliveries." "And you would go faster," said Henry. "Watch me." Henry screeched to a halt, just in time. Henry reversed the coaches into place. "Did you see that?" asked Henry. "I want my coaches, Neil," said Thomas. "You can pull freight cars first," laughed Neil. Thomas knew he was going to behave. "Okay," said Thomas. "I'll pull my freight cars." So Neil went to find the freight cars for Thomas. So Neil went to collect some freight cars for Thomas. And then he set off back to the shunting yard. At last, Neil arrived with Thomas's freight train. At last, Thomas was coupled on. "Okay," said Thomas. "No confusion or delay." And he puffed off importantly away. Thomas was speeding down the track with his long line of freight cars. But the troublesome trucks were delighting in mischief. "Go faster, Thomas!" they yelled. Thomas tried to go as fast as he would possibly could, but then Thomas had an accident. Oh dear, said Thomas sadly. I should be pulling coaches instead of these freight cars. I am silly. I shouldn't have listened to Neil. Moments later, Neil arrived with Annie and Clarabelle. I'm sorry that I wouldn't let you pull freight cars. I meant coaches, said Neil. Why would I say freight cars when I meant coaches? I'm sorry you were teasing, laughed Thomas. Can I have Annie and Clarabelle now? Of course you can, Neil said happily. Soon, Thomas was coupled up. Thomas set off. He was proud. Thomas was happy about pulling Annie and Clarabelle. He was sure that he would never have listened to the silly box cab tank engines.